So thank you, Reverend Leip Freeberg, and thank you to Karen Leo Hill, Dartmouth class of 2000, and a musician and Lebanon City Councilor and Grafton County Treasurer for the beautiful music. My name's Ian Scott. I'm a Dartmouth class of 2024 and one of the organizers for the Student Worker Collective at Dartmouth. It has been a beautiful and revitalizing struggle to get to where we're at right now. I'm proud to announce that as of last week, or maybe a week and a half ago, something, I can't remember the dates now, it all blurs together, but we secured an election agreement from the college, and we'll be having our election beginning March 1st. And our friends at the New Hampshire Faith and Labor Coalition were kind enough to organize this event for us so that we can once again reiterate the importance of this election, what it means for our student workers and the Dartmouth dining services, and to highlight more of that, more of our campaign, what we've done to get this far, and why it is so important that our unit votes yes on March 1st. I have Kaya and Nadine from our organizing committee to talk, and then as well we'll have some other workers from our unit come and do some testimonies after that. So yeah, thank you.
Maybe you can stay there and I can stand so we can equalize. No, I'm joking. Oh, really? Okay. So thank you, Ian, and thank you all for gracing us with your presence tonight. It's a difficult day, for all workers of the world, especially those who are in the war-torn regions, especially today in Ukraine, who have recently come under assault and face really tough times. And it is, and I was sort of going through, social media today, and I read this, this essentially quote by Eugene Debs, one of the historic, legendary leaders of the American labor movement, essentially saying that it is never workers who declare war, but it is always, it is never workers who declare war, it is never workers who decide on war, decide on these ambitions, but it is only them and only them who suffer as a result. And it's an undeniable truth that also today it will be, it won't be the not at all the sort of the imperial leaders of Eastern Europe or any other nation who will suffer as a consequence of their actions, but in fact it will be their own people and the people they have chosen to essentially assault. And obviously we feel connected in struggle to all the workers of the world, and our movement essentially began as part of the American labor movement, and especially the American labor movement as it gained traction in higher education. And that has been a process since the 20th century, the latter half of 20th century, but it really got intensified, especially among graduate workers and undergraduates, with the increasing financialization of our universities and higher education. And the result of this was an increasing reliance, especially in schools like Dartmouth, one undergraduate labor to perform tasks and services and jobs that require more fluid working hours and more fluid arrangements and essentially more precarious working conditions. And in other schools, for instance, at Harvard or Yale, with larger graduate worker populations, also here, the sort of increasing outsourcing of academic task and labor to the most precarious and the most unprotected laborers. And a result of this shift was the creation of essentially a sort of this workforce that was less and less students and more workers, not only in terms of their working hours. Many people, many student workers work 10, 15, 20, 25, even 30 hours per week on top of the existing, workload. But also a larger gain, perhaps in consciousness, that it is through our labor, it is through the labor of staff workers, who are represented by SEIU 560, and it is through the labors of student workers who work side by side with our fellow workers at dining locations and other locations all around campus, really. And our organization came to be in the middle of a surge in undergraduate organizing. Our sort of predecessors are in several also smaller colleges. Some in there's a dining undergraduate union in Grinnell College, who've organized in 2016, and there's a currently organizing undergraduate wall-to-wall union at Kenyon College, who face enormous challenges by perhaps one of the most hostile administrations to really ever exist in the United States, who has retained Jones Day, one of the most lucrative management side labor law firms in existence. In the past, they have represented Donald Trump and several other really egregious people, and I think they've also represented ExxonMobil in one of their worst scandals. And so Vista, and it is part also through their experience that we were able to put this together, and it is our sort of duty here to express the strongest solidarity possible with student workers currently struggling in Kenyon and other graduate students struggling all across the country, and those undergraduates who are currently in the process of building their own unions. This is only just beginning. Would you like to sort of take us through our own sort of first steps?
Hi everyone, my name is Nadine. I'm an international student from Brazil. I'm so happy to have all of you here. We all know it's a busy time in the term, and as Kaya was mentioned, we have a great, gigantic workload here at Dartmouth, so we really thank you so much for coming here today. We're just going to talk to you guys a little bit through our process to this day about the union. Right, this process began on the last fall 2021, when a lot of students were on campus. This happened because a lot of people weren't on campus previously due to COVID, and then in the fall we had a lot of people here, and Dartmouth was clearly not prepared to deal with all the logistics necessary to have all these students on campus. As a result, we had really long lines at Novak, for instance. So besides all the workload student workers already have, it's a really exhaustive job to work at any of the locations, and I'm just giving Novak as an example. I can speak off with my property because that's where I work. We had those gigantic lines and customers constantly asking where their drink was, and it was just an additional stress we had to deal with, in addition to everything that we already have to go through. So we tried to talk with Dartmouth Dining Services about the situation, and initially, they made it seem as if there was nothing we could do about it. You know, it's a lot of people on campus, we have gigantic lines, we cannot do anything about it. And I feel like between a lot of student workers, there was also this feeling of hopelessness, of thinking that there was nothing that we could do. You know, we wouldn't be able to change the situation, you know. So in that context, the idea of having a union was born. You know, what if we actually got in union, you know, to be able to talk to the administration with power, to talk back to what they're saying, to be able to fight for our rights here with actual power, collective power. And then this idea was talked among people, you know, we were starting to consider the what if, and what were the possibilities of this actually happening. We formed a group of people we are calling the organization committee. And with these people, we've been talking strategies on how to talk to people and how to talk to student workers about this entire situation. We were having one-on-ones during the fall term. So we were basically just talking individually to student workers about the idea of a union, if they would like to be a part of it, what they thought about it. And we had an overwhelming positive response. Everyone was on board with it and really excited about this. I do make a note that some international students were fearing the consequences they could have in their visas, and I use this as an opportunity to state that I'm an international student here, and I promise you that my visa is fine. So this process is entirely legal, and there can be no implications for any students on visas here to be involved, to be represented by a union. If you want to go on to talk about something.
I'm also an international student, by the way. I'm from Turkey. And yeah, I guess it's an interesting also phenomenon. Largely, our movement has been led not due to nothing by people of color, by black students, by first-generation low-income students, by undocumented students, and by international students who happen to constitute the overwhelming majority of workers at dining locations. Not for nothing, but because they happen to constitute simply the working class population at Dartmouth. And so it really was no surprise, perhaps, that this this movement sort of flourished in dining locations, because when you gather this many people of these natures and these experiences and these of this spirit and these consciousnesses, they start to think, my peers look like me, but the people who come and order coffees, they don't look like me. They look quite different than me, and in fact, they wear differently than me, they hang out in different places, they have different friends, but I look around me, and it's just my people. So what is this difference? And essentially, that difference is it's a class difference. At Dartmouth, there's, we can, obviously, there's no shortage of talk privilege. We are still one of the luckiest few of that working class population, but the fact is that there is a very large student population at Dartmouth who depend on these students, on these wages, on the work that they do to really get along. There are people who use it to pay for trips back home. There are people who send the money back home. There are international students who earn in US dollars, which are far more valuable currency, which is a far more valuable currency than they have back home, so they send it back home. And, they also think further, let's say a student worker who works 20 hours per week. That student essentially spends 2 waking days that their wealthier peers spend really doing whatever they want. They spend those times partying, studying, leisuring, sleeping, and they spend, on average, those 2 days working. And the implication when you put that in context is that wealthier students at the school get to live their college lives 2 days more. So the condemnation of being working class essentially amounts to the fact that you live 2 days less than your peers. And that is a very, very interesting sort of formulation. And those all go into creating the very specific sort of consciousness. You know, it's that, you know, Marx has a quote that is essentially, you know, one lifetime of working people's work for an entire lifetime to ensure a lifetime of leisure for rich people. And that is, and you know, the fact of the matter is, I don't think we want to have any more of that. There is a moment, and that moment has come, and there is no return from this moment, and we are going to get what we want, whether it be proper wages. Wages have been stagnating not only for student workers, for every worker in this country for decades now, while inflation is rising, while living conditions are getting harder, while you know, prices overall are getting higher and higher, and then wages are stagnating. Welfare programs are getting slimmer and slimmer. No one appears to be resolute enough to actually do something. And you know, working peoples around the country are realizing that this will not come from the heavens, that these gains will not come without struggling for them. And you know, this fall, I don't think it is a surprise that our organizing started this fall in the middle of one of the largest strike waves that this country has seen in years. You know, we had the Kaiser workers, we had the Kellogg's workers, we had Columbia workers, John Deere workers, and we also have a strike for better wages, better working conditions, and we also have a historic organizing campaign by Starbucks workers. And it is all on this larger level coming together, I think, on this sort of really grander undercurrent of working class struggle. And it is giving us hope. And essentially we, in terms of having a union and, you know, bargaining collectively, there's no question that, you know, that will bring sort of, you know, better wages to student workers. It will bring better working conditions. It will give us mediums to arbitrate our problems and issues. And I think it's also important that there's also a larger vision when it comes to our union and what we want to do with it, is that we do recognize that our struggles are connected to the struggles of Upper Valley, of New Hampshire, of Vermont, and all the workers and tenants and everybody else working all around. And we fully intend to use all the power and the energy that comes from our union to work towards towards a livable Upper Valley, New Hampshire, and Vermont.
Can you talk about this thing?
You want to go?
So just like the workers across this country, the workers here at Dartmouth have had enough. So this term in the beginning of the winter term, we delivered to the Dartmouth administration a letter declaring our intention to unionize and asking them to voluntarily recognize us. This process would make everything faster and easier between us. You know, it would really be a more democratic and fast process for us to get the meeting. We gave them a good timeline for them to for us to hear their response, and they delayed it. So we only got their response in the end of January, and even though we sent the letter to them the beginning of January. And they rejected our proposal of voluntary recognition, but they did say that they agree to talk with us and to make this process faster and, like maintain a communication. We weren't sure if we would have this kind of communication with them, because as we've seen the examples of other colleges across the country, the administration can take a more specific union busting campaign and make everything harder. So the college did agree to talk with us and make this easier. We had some issues in the communication with them in terms of temporality. So we do have a specific context here at Dartmouth of terms of being just 3 months, a quarter system. That did not match with the other dates we had of the National Labor Board, for instance. So to figure that out with the board and with the Dartmouth administration was a bit tricky. But even though now we have an election date, and it's going to happen throughout March, so everyone's going to have time to vote. And we hope that it's 2 votes, union yes. It's really important to highlight that throughout this process, even though we still don't have a formal union, we already got sick pay, which is a super important demand. We want it. So that means that if student workers get COVID and cannot work because of this, they're going to be compensated for this. They're not going to have to work, nor to be concerned about money or being sick. So this was a crucial win of the union. And we also got a temporarily raise for TDS workers to have to be working within those uncertain conditions due to COVID. It's a temporal raise of 15%. And one of our first demands when we actually win the union, because we're gonna win this, is to make this raise permanent. It's really impressive everything we've accomplished so far. And as I've said, we still don't even have the formal union. So we can only imagine all the possibilities we're gonna have when we actually have the meeting with the union, when we actually have the power to talk back to the administration, to answer back, to don't let them to be the ones who decides about our futures here. You wanna talk about the election process in English? You wanna talk about the election process in English?
Yeah, before we sort of have sort of testimonials from student workers who talk about their sort of general working conditions and why they themselves unionize, it is sort of the sort of more logistically, the ballots will go out on next Tuesday, and we will have about like 3 weeks or so to send the ballots in, and the vote count will be on March 30th. We will have probably a watch party also. And the Dartmouth has committed to a neutrality agreement, which is a neutrality pledge, which we will obviously be keeping up to the task of, making sure they keep their word, and we need your, obviously, help and support in ensuring that. And, we have little doubt that, we at the end of this process, we will have our union. From I think nearly a month from now, we will have essentially won our union. But the question is how powerful we are when we start bargaining. And the point of that is that we need to get as many people out to vote union yes as possible. We have around 170 person wide electoral sort of population, and we want to get 170 people to vote union yes, to go into that bargaining process as powerful and as strong as possible, and to really send a message. There's this, I sent a professor an email asking for them to sign on to the letter when we sent it. And the professor replied, and it was the most insane reply I ever got. And you take a professor's class and you somewhat respect them because they say some authoritative things, the master's discourse and so on. But at the sort of the reply I got was, it was essentially to the extent that he didn't believe that student workers had the time to commit to a union. He didn't believe that student workers worked enough to care about a union, and he added a quip, which I hadn't even said the word socialism. He said the problem with socialism is that it takes too many meetings, and he attributed to Oscar Wilde. And I replied and I said, there is there is no evidence on anywhere that quote actually belongs to Oscar Wilde, professor. But what does belong to Oscar Wilde is this quote, that the best among the poor is the ungrateful. And it is quite right that they are ungrateful. They are quite right to be angry, and they're quite right to want more. So, but obviously that's not the sort of archetype of professors. We have so many amazing faculty here who have supported to the end. So thank you to all also.